right, so a very valuable lesson just now. We just recorded this update, right, to the second day in Minneapolis doing the film on Bruce Ario. And I did not hit record on the Zoom pod track, so... I mean, it's good that it happened now because we're just practicing for tomorrow. We're going to be going to Bruce's church in Minneapolis that he was a member of for almost 40 years. And we're going to be conducting interviews as well as getting footage of the church. He had an interview there a couple of years ago, so we'll be visiting some of the same places. And I have now this lav mic attached to my sternum, which is how we're going to be conducting this tomorrow. And the fact that I did not hit record on this now, absolutely, I will never forget to hit record tomorrow, the day after, all these other interviews. So this is a nice, safe space to make mistakes, which is why we're doing it. You know, everything is jam-packed. Today we went to Minnehaha Falls, where, well, first of all, I mean, maybe it's good that we say this because we didn't mention it in the previous recording where it's important to Bruce because this is where his one of his first religious transformations occurred, where he believes that his grandmother came back to him as an angel in the Minnehaha Falls area, right around the waterfall. And since it features prominently in his poetry as well as in his other writing, you know, it makes sense to capture it and work it into the film somehow. And so when we arrived, right, it was perfect weather. It was misting. It was raining, but not raining hard, right? It was just kind of going down occasionally. And, you know, tons of fog, a lot to capture. Weather is perfect. Leaves are perfect. It's red, green, orange, yellow, absolutely everything. And
that was great.
Yeah, I always have this odd feeling wherever I travel somewhere for whatever reason, you know, Bruce has that line, time has a way of protecting me. I feel like I get protected, right, in terms of the weather, things and other things too. I remember Joe was kind of worried about well how the weather's going to be, and I was like, you know what? Since I'm on this trip, I think I honestly it didn't even cross my mind to even look at the weather. I just knew it was going to be cold and that was it. But it didn't even if it said it was going to be raining the whole time, I was like, I know it's going to be fine. We're going to get what we need. Don't worry about it. Whatever's going to be, you know, it's going to be doable, right? And so when we arrived, there was just tons of stuff to see, and this was first in this little random place, not at the falls, but already there we found a ton of stuff. There was a lot of pools, a lot of reflections, and I found some pools with cracked concrete underneath that has a very nice sort of reverb with the city, Minneapolis, that kind of feel that Bruce is very much about. One of these pools had a worm that just kept, you know, crawling through it, right? I definitely captured that.
Nice.
I was a little bit nervous in terms of the videography, and yet I'd say a few minutes into it, just finding some of these places, it's I know for a fact that, you know, although Joel is doing primarily the cinematography for the film, I know that a good chunk definitely of the footage that I got today is definitely going to make it into the film. He has this one poem, Stuck in a Tree. Is that what
Stretched in a Tree.
Yeah, Stretched in a Tree, where so it's an area of 10 lines, and each line gets longer and longer and longer, right? It's supposed to resemble a canopy. It starts with the tree trunk, and then it ends essentially in this kind of canopy. And we were talking yesterday about the Sylvia Plath documentary, which is, although it's on a poet, it's very prosaic in the sense that once a poem starts talking about hills or whatever, you see images of hills, and you know, there's a very prosaic way of featuring all that, but capturing, you know, for instance, these trees or whatever else, just in the reflections upside down, you have it go as, you know, video footage. You know, it's raining, so the drops are coming in, and I caught this one bubble action. There was this bubble there that every couple seconds a bubble would form, then it would sort of, you know, ripple out. You know, it would blow over, ripple out. But this one bubble, it just would not burst, and it just kept traveling and traveling and traveling. And I'm, you know, zooming in, and I'm I'm going, with the camera just tracking it, and then suddenly, like it bursts and like everything just like ripples out, and you see, the tree behind it, and it's like this is a good opportunity to use, an image like this, right, for a Pomex stretch in a tree where it's the less predictable version of similar imagery, but it's less predictable, it's new, it's different, it's not something that you would expect, right? So it works in a way that's not as prosaic as maybe some of these other documentaries might do.
Sure.
So maybe you could talk about your experiences here today.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I think we agree that both of us, right out of the gate, we were kind of driving along there in the park, trying to find a reasonable place to park. It was a little bit hard to figure out exactly where the falls were. And we had a lot of gear. I mean, we brought everything with us today, partly because we knew that Minnehaha Falls was going to be an important stop and a big stop where we wanted to capture a lot of different things. I know for my own shot list here, it had maybe the most variations out of any stop we're going to make, with things I wanted to try to capture, so that we've got a lot to work with in the edit. But we had this really nice, basically just spot right off the side of the road with some picnic benches and really lovely trees, all the foliage, great color to it. The fog and mist are in there. There were just a lot of nice opportunities. And I definitely noticed with you, once we got out of the car, and maybe after those first 5 to 10 minutes of sort of feeling things out, triple checking the camera to make sure it's actually on and working, and so on, you sort of went your way, I went my way, and we both just went after the things we wanted to get and the found things that we weren't even counting on, right? So, I admire how long you spent at that particular puddle. I got some stuff there too, and I had noticed it. But you really you stuck with it, which I admire. I think there's something to that, right? Just resting in a spot and letting things happen. It's kind of one of the hallmarks of, when you listen to a lot of good photographers and even cinematographers talk, that's kind of what it takes a lot of the time, is being persistent with a location and letting something really remarkable eventually happen. You might have an attraction to it at first. It seems like there's something there, and you begin capturing, and then eventually more interesting things begin bubbling up, and then it kind of gets exciting. You really lock into that moment. So it's been gratifying to watch you kind of discover a little bit of your photographer and cinematographer's eye here a little bit. And obviously then I'm doing my thing. You're also very kind to schlep so much of my gear around.
But I actually I've always said this before. I actively like doing this kind of stuff.
Yes, you
do.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to a grocery store or whatever. I like, get a bag in front of you, get a bag behind you, and you think it's a lot, but really, if this is dragging you forward, that's dragging you back. The center of gravity just fixes. And then we were going up and down the steps. It's tons and tons of steps. I mean, it feels like a nice workout. And if I was going to be at home, I'd be exercising, and I'm not going to be exercising here. And yet here, I felt exhausted after the day, right? Not only was it just kind of intellectually taxing, even other things that you don't really necessarily appreciate until you start doing them. That seem kind of small. My camera compared to yours, my camera is tiny.
Yeah.
And yet, when we got to the falls, there was this kind of thing there where it said something like, everything is going to be okay.
With Jesus.
With Jesus was the phrase. And that was graffitied right on the kind of rocks that was before the falls.
Yes.
And this obviously has, a lot of to do with Bruce himself.
Sure.
And I remember, so I was all right, I want to capture this, but in a way that's a little bit less obvious. And let me start with the falls, and let me then start to track further and further down until we reach the rocks where I'm standing at, and make it in a way that's kind of blurry, and then focus in on that phrase, and then just quickly cut it off.
Yeah.
And yet to capture that in a way that's continuous. First of all, just moving the camera, you could do it in a way where it's kind of shaky and just, you want it to be smooth, right? But then also as you're doing it, obviously, depending on where you're focusing, the camera itself is going to go out of focus. So, okay, you're physically, even small camera, you're moving it slowly back. I'm personally, whenever I do this, I'm holding my breath. So I'm, I'm about to like faint half the time. On top of that, for whatever reason, they shut off the water in the water fountains in these parks. They told me like, oh, we shut it off for the season. So I had no water, and I'm holding my breath. I'm moving I'm panning the camera down. I'm trying to pan it down and then keeping it in focus, right? Moving the ring around, and then making sure that as you're getting to that text, where it's kind of like unbroken, like you want to do it in one, like, so like I literally have like 12 minutes of that footage just trying to get those 30 seconds of like appropriate panning, and it, arms tired, your mind's like, oh, like, it is actually very taxing in ways that you don't expect until you actually, sit down to do it.
Yeah, it is. And it's even kind of nerve wracking, and that's with a stationary subject, right? It absolutely, as I've been learning and ramping up to this time here, watching lots of different videos on, in particular on cinematography, and the way that things get done, it gives you a ton of respect. I mean, I already had a lot of respect for those that make films, just because there's so much that goes into it. But cinematographers and directors of photography, DPs in particular, and their assistants and their teams. I mean, what you end up realizing, the more you look into this stuff, is on a pro grade movie set, there is a focus puller. That's one person's job. They have a remote focus pull, and while the DP's in there with the camera moving and getting the exact framing that you're talking about, someone's there wirelessly. They're not touching the focus. I mean, you and I have to do it ourselves, right? So it adds to the challenge a bit. But anyway, these are complex things. They're difficult to do. It's not easy to pull off. So again, that's a spot where you did a good job persisting and sticking with it. I was at that spot for a while. I had quite a few other angles too that I was getting, and then you made a nice discovery. Because I was sort of planted there at that first bridge we came to. You trekked on just a little bit further, and you're like, well, we need to be down here as well, because this is like a great diagonal view right to the falls, which turned out to be very much the case. We got a lot of more stuff captured there, but you went even further on, and you went down that long set of stone steps to get to the quieter, calmer part, down river a bit, and we had a fruitful time there as well. So it's good that you found that.
Yeah, there's so you don't see the falls from there, but the stream is moving, and Joe has a GoPro where he wanted to capture footage underwater and then coming out of the water. And it's very nice because during the fall you get all kinds of leaves of different colors coming at you underwater, right? When I was looking at the footage after the fact, right, just leaf after leaf after leaf, and I had the idea that if we're going to be doing this, it might work well because Bruce Arias in his youth, he had various drug addictions and alcohol addictions, and that could be a good kind of metaphor for some of the way that he feels like throughout maybe the poetry or the John Argent Jr. Character in Bruce Arias' City Boy novel, where because I was thinking, all right, we need to somehow make the drug addiction, play into the text, right, or into the film. And I was thinking, like, should we get some footage somewhere, like sitting in a bar? Like, should we do something? Because there are like bar scenes, obviously in the text. But when Joel mentioned like being underwater, I was like, what if that is going to be a kind of like metaphor for some of this, where you keep like taking it out and putting it back in, and it's kind of like treading water, right? Almost like you're drowning, and you'll get a good footage here, then a few feet over there, a few feet over there. You can combine it in a way where the audio is just kind of consistent throughout. Like you could choose like one of the audio tracks from there and just make it extend it out, and
just loop it,
and just have the video itself different, and then you could break the video with like split second, like black screen, move to the next, right, in between. And this could work very nicely for discussions of drugs in a way that's not totally predictable, right? Like in the previous recording, I mentioned this great film by I forget his name, but he's a Norwegian filmmaker, and he did a film called Oslo, August 31st, and so it's a writer that's the protagonist of the film, and he has a heroin addiction, and he just comes out of treatment, And although it's like been a year since he had heroin, it seems to be like all that he could think about. And he takes this like boulder and he goes into the river holding the boulder, and he quickly like realizes like what am I doing, right? He goes underwater, but he's like, what am I doing? He drops and it comes out. And this could be like a nice way to explore that metaphor without doing the predictable rote stuff that you might find in the majority of films. It's one of those things where it's like, all right, so I'm not, an expert filmmaker, and Joe is a very good photographer, but this is like new for him as well. Simply by having, knowing what you want to do structurally, skeletally, symbolically, the kinds of images, some of the like technical shortcomings are not going to be very visible once you have that deeper, overarching, thing playing out. And once the ideas are good, right, so much else seems forgivable. Then little by little, right, you could get better with like other films or other things that you do.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. And definitely I'm hoping, today was so jam packed. We really haven't reviewed any footage, it's just been run and gun all day. So I'm certainly hoping, and I might do this a little bit before bed tonight, combing back over some of those clips that they are quality enough. I mean, the GoPro, it's such an amazing little device. The thing shoots in up to 4K. I was shooting it in 3K because it gives a couple other options that I wanted to be able to use. So I hope it's quality enough, and we're obviously, I've got it on a selfie stick, but, putting it in the water in good faith that all that's going to hold. I almost should have duct taped it too, just to be sure, but it held up okay. But yeah, with all of this, I think that, another thing that's going to be nice, and I told you this ahead of time, I brought several different kinds of cameras. I have a couple that I still have yet to even break out. And I think that using some different types of footage can be nice too. We're going to figure out how to clip all this together. But, in a film like this, where we're really trying to focus in on the poetry and go for, different modes of expression for different things that Bruce was noticing and writing about. I think we'll be able to pull it all together and hopefully make it cohere. Some of it might not work, and if it doesn't work, then we'll scrap it. I mean, that's okay. But while we're here, it's just go mode to capture any of these ideas. Instead of getting them down on paper, we're getting them down on film or on a sensor, and we'll comb through later. But yeah, so the falls were great, and then after that, we ventured back to that little industrial section that we had noticed driving in to our Airbnb last night from the airport, and said, we both basically at the same moment, like the eyes were tracking over there, and we're like, that could be a nice spot. So we did that. Spent a fair amount of time there too. We were getting some images of trains. You found a junkyard. We had train tracks. We had some old decrepit buildings. And these are things that we're trying to find a way to, again, make them feel fresh. I mean, any city is going to have these kind of images. Hopefully in the context of Bruce and his writing and his life, these were things that were near and dear to him, or that he was noticing and writing about constantly. So that's a big drive, for wanting to get stuff like this in the film. And then we had an interesting encounter with, I don't even know if I'd call it an interesting encounter. It was just sort of a happenstance thing with a local Minneapolis resident who was biking by kind of on the sidewalk behind us, and called out to us. I don't think either of us really noticed him at first. And he asked us if we knew what the building was, or what it used to be, that we were taking photos and footage of. And obviously we don't know. There's no signage there to really indicate. And so I think he maybe told us what his father had told him he thought it used to be, or something like that. And it was a pretty quick interaction. I mean, it lasted less than a minute in total. We both realized as he rode away that we wished we could have, flicked the camera on and maybe had an interaction with him and asked him about his life in Minneapolis a bit, or whatever. I think I snagged one, basically quick, from the hip snapshot photo of him before he biked away. But we both agreed, those are the kind of chance things that are going to continue to happen over the next few days, probably, that we need to be a little bit more quick to take advantage.
Because even I have this small camera, and there's a Rode style microphone on top of it, so you could quickly grab it and be like, all right, do you want to do a little interview? And in my mind, I'm thinking like, all right, the kind of like controlling sort of like motif could be amongst some of these like very quick, like little, minute or two sort of interviews is, what is the city of Minneapolis in relation to you? Like, because this is a recurring theme in Bruce Ario's City Boy, where he's trying to understand what is his relationship to the city. And specifically with the person today, right? He was, he was a bit haggard, he's a little bit weathered. You could tell by his teeth. You could tell by the fact that, middle of the day on a Thursday, right? He's just riding around a bike in this totally desolate area, smoking a cigarette, and he what exactly is his relation to the city? What does he think about it?
Yeah.
Are there like city disappointments? Does he feel mistreated by it? Does he feel happy with it? Did he get what he expected? And this could apply to like anybody, right? I feel like in general, there's a ton of people that are kind of like stopping us, and simply by seeing us, so we have cameras around, they're asking questions.
Yeah.
Today, because there was like no water in the park, I needed to go to the Dairy Queen, and immediately the guy, he just saw like the camera on my neck, he started asking questions about what I'm doing, what I'm shooting, and that could have been a 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute interview also in relation to the city. And because again, the film is going to have place, like any film is going to have, or any work of art will always have places of potential monotony that you're going to have to break somehow. And
True,
one of these breakages for us could be, if we're talking about the city writ large, these bits and pieces, like these different people answering this question in their own very different kind of like distinct perhaps ways, it's going to be useful. So perhaps now, like when we see people out there, even if they're not coming up to us, just like ambush them with a potential interview. We're doing a movie, you want to appear in it for 30 seconds, right? A lot of people are going to say yes, they just will. Some people might say no. But there's enough interest, I feel, where you could potentially get something of value. So, I mean, depending on who we see, what we get, and how like the rest of the film plays out. Because again, I have not started on the screenplay at all.
Right.
My idea was I'm going to go to Minneapolis, I'm going to see what the footage is, and based on that, right, I'm going to decide what I could do. Because I'm just keeping it fresh, like in my mind, like when I did my photographic video on one of my cats that recently passed, Lord. You could check it out on the YouTube channel now, and like I had the pre-existing photos, right? So based on the photos that I had, that's the script that just inevitably emerged. And same thing is going to happen here, right? We have the skeletal structure, but still, like finessing it is going to based on what you get. So I wasn't even worrying about the script until I got here, and now like things are cohering simply by being here.
Yeah. Well, and I think that works fine because obviously I do have some structure to my ideas of what to capture in terms of images. I have my shot list and our location list and different things we want to make sure to get. But I really have viewed it as my job while we're here to put the pedal to the metal and try to give us, of course, as a team, but you in particular, to be able to work on the script, as much material to work with as possible, right? So that we don't, it'll happen a little bit inevitably, but so that very rarely would either of us have an idea for the scripting, and you're sitting there working on it, and you have to say, well, it'd be nice to put this in there, but we don't have the right images for it. I'm really hoping that we can avoid that, right? And just have a very nice library to be able to pull from. So the cameras are on, the cameras are rolling, and I went out again this evening, just kind of while you were starting your wind down process before we were going to do this. I went out for one more 45-minute to an hour journey out there, and went down to the Mississippi River actually, and was trying to see what things are available down there. There's some great stuff, some very nice lights at night with the Stone Arch Bridge, and some light reflecting across the undulating, parts of the river, and so on. So that's good, and we'll see what the next few days give us as well in terms of weather and other options. But it's been a strong start, I would say. I was a little bit stressed today, just because we spent a long time in Minnehaha Park and at the falls, we spent a chunk of time, which was unplanned, so it wasn't a location we had scouted with those industrial buildings and the trains and stuff, but it's good stuff. So, we're going to jump on it. But I think we'll be able to kind of click through a bit quicker on some of these other locations. There's some stuff localized around the church, one of Bruce's old apartments, several other spots that he used to haunt or frequent that I think we can get to, and it won't be that complex, and we won't need to spend a ton of time there because they're really just sort of for the biographical structure and some snippets here and there to support that. Some of it certainly, would have made it into his writing too. But yeah, I think from here, the first big domino, we pushed it over today, and hopefully we just keep that momentum going.
I mean, in some ways it does feel like the biggest thing, but because just physically, it's the most daunting. I mean, going forward, we're going to have the interviews, they're a different kind of stress. Yeah. Right. I don't know.
Social stress.
Yeah. I don't know what anybody's going to really be like.
Yep.
And you have to work around other things in different ways, but physically, there's not going to be, it's going to be colder, but there's not going to be the rain. There's not going to be necessarily the same amount of lugging equipment. There's not going to be a de facto extended hike like we had today.
No, there definitely won't be, because even tomorrow at the church, I mean, I'm probably going to bring most or all the gear again, because the church is my other primo location. To me, in my mind, it's been Minnehaha Park and the church were kind of two pillars, maybe a couple other spots I can't think of right at the top of my head. But those have been the beauty that should be there. And just the visual interest to those two places, one exterior, one interior, and their importance to Bruce, right? The appearance of his angel at the falls, 40 plus years at the church, and being so ingrained in life there. These are really big pillar pieces. So, there probably will be most of the gear coming along tomorrow, but we're just going to drive the car up and be the first people in the church and go drop it near one of the pews. Don't have to worry about anybody taking it or stealing it. Don't have to worry about lugging it, many, many steps up, down, sideways, whatever. It's climate controlled, and we're inside, we're indoors instead of outdoors. So yeah, to your point, I think a decent amount of the most challenging elemental stuff probably happened today.
Yeah.
But
yeah, the people part of it, it is a different kind of stress. I mean, because even the way that Jill and I are, I mean, when I was choosing the Airbnb, I was all right, 2 different bedrooms spaced far apart, 2 different bathrooms spaced far apart, right? Even us liking each other, we're gonna need space. I can't be around people too much, right? This needs to
have a space.
This needs to be my refuge, right? When I come back, so.